we're going to talk about one of the coolest and strangest warships in the world. The Russian aircraft carrier Admiral Kuznetsov. This iron giant has always been in the spotlight, but instead of scaring its enemies, it's mostly been a source of trouble for them. Believe me, this ship has a world of bizarre and unusual stories. From midnight escapes in Ukraine to repeated fires and its planes crashing. Greetings to you all. I'm Elias Farok too. This is Persian Trend, and I promise you that after watching this video, you'll understand the difference between Russian and American technology and exactly what the Russians are talking about when they discuss their aircraft carrier. The story of the Admiral Kuznetsov is like a spy movie, full of big ambitions, strange name changes, and a cool sea escape. This ship, which is now a symbol of the Russian Navy, actually dates back to the Soviet era, and after the collapse of that empire, it ended up with a strange fate. This ship has changed its name 4 times during its lifetime, which shows the political games going on behind the scenes. Riga, 1982. When construction of this ship began at the Black Sea shipyard in Mykolaiv, Ukraine, it was called Riga, named after the capital of Latvia, which at that time was part of the Soviet Union. Leonid Brezhnev, 1982. A few weeks later, Leonid Brezhnev, the leader of the Soviet Union, died. They quickly named the ship after him. This was more of a political move than anything else, similar to what happens in Iran these days. When one of the IRGC commanders or prominent figures of the Islamic Republic is killed, martyred, or something happens to them, we often see their names on military equipment. Tbilisi, 1987. But the story didn't end there. In 1987, they changed its name again to Tbilisi, the capital of Georgia. Why? It's not clear, but it was probably because of internal disputes within the Communist Party. Admiral Kuznetsov, 1990. Finally, in 1990, they changed its name for the last time to Admiral Kuznetsov. This was in honor of a legendary Soviet Navy commander from World War II. Interestingly, this name change happened just a few months before the collapse of the Soviet Union. This ship was designed in the 1980s when the Soviet Union wanted to keep up with American aircraft carriers. But unlike American carriers which were built solely for warfare in the oceans, Kuznetsov was a kind of heavy aircraft carrier. That means it not only carried aircraft but was also heavily armed itself. Because the Soviet Union didn't have steam catapult technology, this ship instead has a ski jump ramp that launches aircraft into the air at an angle. This method is cheaper and simpler, but it also comes with a lot of limitations. Unlike American carriers which rely solely on their aircraft, the Kuznetsov is equipped with 12 Granite anti-ship missiles, each with a range of up to 600 kilometers. So even if all its aircraft are destroyed, it can still launch attacks. This carrier was built in Mykolaiv, Ukraine, back when Ukraine was still part of the Soviet Union. But when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, Ukraine declared independence and claimed the carrier as its own, because it was still unfinished. This is where the story gets interesting. In December 1991, when Ukraine officially claimed the carrier, the Russian crew launched a secret operation. The carrier, under the command of Captain Viktor Yagin, escaped from the port at midnight without Ukraine's permission. Some say this was done in secret coordination with a few Ukrainian officials, because many of the crew were Ukrainian but had remained loyal to Russia. Turkey could have stopped the carrier from passing, but since Russia claimed it was just a regular ship and not an aircraft carrier, Turkey let it through. After a stressful journey, the carrier arrived at the Northern Fleet base in Vidyayevo and became Russian property for good. Now that we've heard the story of the ship's history, it's time to get under the skin of this beast and see what it's made of. The Kuznetsov is, in a way, a mix of strange engineering, technological limitations, and some rather odd decisions. This ship is truly a giant. It's 306 meters long. That's the length of 3 football fields. At its widest point, it's 72 meters across, and when fully loaded, it weighs 61,390 tons. To help you picture it, that's about the same as 10,000 African elephants. Its height from the waterline to the highest point is 64 meters. That's roughly the height of a 20-story building. This massive size means that even during ocean storms, it can be seen from a distance. Beneath this enormous exterior is a propulsion system, which is actually one of the ship's main weaknesses. The Kuznetsov uses a steam boiler and turbine system featuring 4 TV-12-4 steam turbines with a total of 200,000 horsepower and 8 kV G4 boilers. This system can propel the ship up to 29 knots, which is about 54 kilometers per hour. But the problem is that these engines break down a lot and constantly need repairs. Many times during important missions, the ship shuts down in the middle of the journey and has to be rescued by a tugboat. That famous black smoke is also because of this old system that burns mazout, heavy fuel oil. One of the coolest parts of the ship is its flight deck. Unlike American aircraft carriers that have steam catapults, the Kuznetsov has a ski jump ramp with a 12-degree angle that launches the planes into the air. This platform is 60 meters long and allows planes to catapult up. But this method comes with a lot of problems. The planes can't take off at maximum weight, that is, when they're fully loaded with fuel and weapons, and the launch speed of the planes is much lower than on catapult-equipped carriers. The flight deck is 305 meters long and 70 meters wide, and it's made from a special type of steel that can withstand the landing of heavy aircraft. For landing, the carrier has 4 steel cables that the planes catch with a hook on their tail, bringing them to a stop in a short distance. But sometimes this system malfunctions and the cables snap, which has caused several planes to go straight into the sea. Beneath the flight deck, there is a 4,000 square meter hangar that can accommodate about 20 aircraft. The aircraft are moved between the deck and the hangar by 2 large elevators, each measuring 20 by 15 meters. Each of these elevators can lift 40 tons, which is sufficient for heavy fighters like the Su-33. The hull of the Kuznetsov is made from special stainless steel that does not rust and is resistant to seawater corrosion. It has a certified anti-torpedo protection system that can withstand the explosion of 400 kilograms of TNT. The ship is also equipped with several advanced systems to reduce the impact of underwater explosions. Despite all this coolness, there is something wrong with Kuznetsov. Its ventilation system is terrible, and in warm regions, the inside of the ship becomes like an oven. Its desalination devices sometimes malfunction, making long voyages miserable for the crew. Worst of all is its sewage system, which sometimes breaks down and fills the ship with a terrible stench. Among all the aircraft carriers in the world, the Kuznetsov is something else. Because unlike the others that only rely on their aircraft, it can launch direct attacks itself. Its most powerful weapons are the granite missiles, which are like daggers ready to pierce the heart of the enemy fleet. These massive missiles, which are the size of a bus, can hit enemy ships from a distance greater than that between Tehran and Mashhad. What's even cooler is that these missiles can communicate with each other. Interestingly, these missiles can be launched in groups, which makes them much more effective. The ship's defense isn't just limited to offense. The Kinjal and Kortek air defense systems cover the ship like an iron umbrella. The Kinjal can fire at multiple targets simultaneously, and the Kortek, with its insane rate of fire, thousands of rounds per minute, destroys anything that gets past the first line of defense. If a submarine even dares to come close, anti-submarine rockets and depth charges are waiting for it. Now let's get to what makes the Kuznetsov special: its aircraft and pilots. The mainstay of the carrier's air force is the Sukhoi Su-33 fighters, which can both engage in aerial combat and attack enemy ships. But the problem is, to take off from the carrier, they have to offload half of their fuel and weapons. The MiG-29s, which are newer, have plenty of problems of their own. Even though they have more advanced radars, they keep breaking down and end up grounded. Amidst all this, the K-27 and K-52K helicopters act as the eyes of the carrier. They can hunt submarines or destroy tanks on the shore with Hermes missiles. But all these impressive systems have one big problem: operational limitations. The Kuznetsov can't launch aircraft one after another like American carriers can. That ski jump ramp prevents the planes from taking off at full capacity. And when the sea is stormy, air operations are basically shut down. This is where you start to wonder whether this carrier is really worth keeping or not. The Kuznetsov has had its share of ups and downs throughout its life. Sometimes it's been a hero, and other times it's caused trouble itself. Let's take a look at the key moments in this ship's life. The first time Kuznetsov made its appearance was in 1995. It set out for the Mediterranean with 13 Su-33 fighter jets and 11 helicopters to show the world that Russia also has a say on the global stage. But this journey was not without trouble. The ship's water purification system malfunctioned, and the crew had to get by on rationed water for several days. Between 2007 and 2008, the ship went to the Mediterranean again. But something strange happened. The ship's fuel system, which was already quite worn out, suddenly started leaking from several places. A large amount of thick black fuel oil spilled into the Mediterranean waters, creating a 20 square kilometer oil slick. The whole world was outraged. At first, the Russians denied anything had happened, but when satellite images were leaked, they claimed that only 30 tons of oil had been spilled. Meanwhile, experts said the amount was 10 times higher than that. Cleaning up this mess took several weeks and caused significant damage to the environment. The ship, however, was not what he had imagined and continued on its mission. All the while, a black oil trail was clearly visible in the water behind it. This disaster earned it the nickname the Moving Volcano. But Kuznetsov's most important test came in 2016 during the Syria operation, when it participated in real combat for the first time and its fighter jets carried out more than 400 sorties. But this success didn't come cheap. During that same Syria mission, two major disasters occurred. First, a MiG-29 that was circling above the carrier waiting for the landing cable to be fixed ran out of fuel and crashed into the sea. The pilot was lucky to be rescued. Just 2 weeks later, a Su-33 was thrown into the sea because the landing cable snapped. Once again, the pilot survived. But Russia had lost two of its multi-million-dollar fighter jets. However, the worst incident happened in 2018. The carrier was in the PD-50 floating dock for repairs when suddenly the dock began to sink. A 70-ton crane fell onto the deck of the carrier and created a 20 square meter hole. One worker died and 4 others were injured. This disaster set the carrier's repairs back by years. Fires also seem to be a regular occurrence for this carrier. In 2019, a major fire lasted 20 hours and 2 people were killed. The cause was a welder working near the oil storage area. This fire caused $7 million in damages. Imagine it's December 12, 2019. The Kuznetsov is docked at Russia's Pier 35 and workers are welding inside the ship's storage areas. No one could have imagined that this ordinary day would turn into one of the worst days for the Russian Navy. At 10:30 in the morning, welding sparks hit some oily rags in storage compartment number 3. Within seconds, the small flames turn into a large fire. Thick black smoke pours out from the ship's hatch. The fire alarm goes off. But for many, it's already too late. The fire spreads through the ventilation system. In some places, the temperature reaches 700 degrees. 14 people get trapped in the fire. The fire suppression system wasn't working properly either. 2 workers suffocate in the smoke. A lot of people are taken to the hospital with severe burns. Local firefighters come to help, but putting out a fire in the confined space of a ship seems almost impossible. The black smoke is so thick that it's visible from several kilometers away. Finally, after a whole day, the firefighters manage to put out the fire. But the damage is horrific. 600 square meters of the ship's interior are completely burned. Important electrical systems were destroyed and there was 500 million rubles, about $7 million in damages. The Kuznetsov is like an old car that always has something breaking down. Its engines are always at risk of shutting down. Its desalination unit sometimes malfunctions. The sewage system breaks down and a foul stench spreads throughout the ship. In hot regions, it's so sweltering inside the carrier that it's unbearable. Despite all these troubles, the Kuznetsov's crew are proud of it. They say this ship is like a kind old grandfather. It always messes things up, but you can't help but enjoy it. The story of the Kuznetsov is like an ancient tragedy, with its hero struggling against his own weaknesses. Its biggest problem is the engines, which, like a heart patient, could fail at any moment. These engines are so unreliable that whenever the carrier goes on a mission, a large tugboat always follows it. It's as if an ambulance is always following a heart patient. The next problem is money. Maintaining this iron giant costs several $100 million a year. But the Russian Navy's budget is like a leaky boat that's constantly sinking. The result is half-finished repairs and the use of second-hand parts which only hide the problem. American warships like the Gerald Ford, with cutting-edge technology and unlimited budgets, are in a different world. Compared to them, the Kuznetsov is like a junk car that's been held together with tape and wire. The difference between them is staggering. An American carrier can handle up to 150 flights a day, but if the Kuznetsov manages 20 flights, they should count themselves lucky. Since 2017, they've been saying they want to fix this ailing giant. The plan was to spend 86 billion rubles, about $1.5 billion, to keep the carrier operational for another 10 years. But as always, everything turned out to be more complicated than they had imagined. First, they replaced the old electrical systems and radars. Then it was time for newer missiles. But when the PD-50 dry dock sank and the 70-ton crane fell onto the Kuznetsov, everything was delayed by a year. Now they say the carrier is supposed to return to the fleet, but many experts doubt that it will ever function properly again. Some say these repairs are more of a political show than an actual necessity. The main question is it really worth spending all this money on a 30-year-old ship? Or would it be better for the Russians to focus on new carriers? The answer might be as elusive as the Kuznetsov itself, but one thing is clear. As long as this carrier remains the symbol of the Russian Navy, Moscow will do whatever it takes to keep it afloat, even if it constantly needs a tugboat. For Russia, the Kuznetsov is not just a ship, it's a living symbol. In the real world, this carrier doesn't have much practical use. The Russian Navy mostly uses it in nearby waters, under the cover of its coastal air defenses. But its true value lies elsewhere. This carrier is like a flag for the spirit of Russian seafaring. Every time it sets out to sea, it's sending a message to the world. We're still a major naval power. Even when it's under repair, its presence on the Russian fleet list is important. It's like a famous player who can't play anymore but whose name still draws crowds to the stadium. When you hear the story of the Kuznetsov or pay attention to it, you notice a certain contradiction in it. On one hand, it's a symbol of Russia's current problems and limitations. Here's the million-dollar question. Is it even worth it for the Russians to keep this ship at all? A giant but a sick one? If you look at it logically, probably not. But in the real world, sometimes symbols or brands are more important than functionality. And propaganda forces governments to do things that are very costly for them. But apart from publicity, bring them no other benefit. Maybe one day the Kuznetsov will become a naval museum. But until then, despite all its costs, all its troubles, and all its limitations, the Russians will try to keep this iron legend alive somehow. Because some things can't be measured by money or efficiency. For the Russians, the Kuznetsov is like a sacred flag. Even if it gets torn to shreds, they won't throw it away. In the end, I hope you enjoyed the story of the Kuznetsov and will answer this question of mine. If you were a decision maker in Russia, say in Mr. Putin's position, would you decide to retire the Kuznetsov, or would you keep spending money on it just to show the rest of the world that you have a strong navy, or to make sure you have a say among the world's powerful countries? I read all your comments and I respond to them as much as possible. Until the next video, goodbye.